Hey, everybody. I'd like to welcome Sherry Galens, fellow professional counselor, to the podcast. And Sherry, what we do here on this podcast is pretty straightforward, which is to discuss how the outer circumstances of our life are stimulating our inner environment in two very distinct ways. One is through the separate psychological ego that we learned at our master's program. And second is through the divine soul connection to all that is. So, why is it important to know the difference? Well, that's why you are on this podcast. That's why you're invited as our guest to help us relate to this inner conflict within ourselves and give us ideas on how to integrate these two very different perspectives into one full, human, messy, beautiful experience. So, Sherry, please jump on in and continue to introduce yourself.
Yeah. So I have my own private practice. I've been working as a counselor for over 20 years now. And I grew into this. It was something I knew I always wanted to do, but the counselor I started off is not the counselor I am today. And I'm very proud of where I'm at. And I just want to share knowledge and connections with you and kind of spread the word, I think, to people and to let people know a little bit more about what therapy and, psychology and counseling can be, that it's, like you said, it's not just what some of us may have learned in a book. We can extend that out and really learn how to be more of our authentic selves. So.
Yeah. And I think, to your point is you and I as counselors are learning who our authentic selves are while we're counseling, right? It's like the more that we're getting in, like, I wasn't in touch with my soul the way I am today, but counseling is helping me do that and talking to other people about it. And so, to your point, like what we learned in the books, we keep evolving, and it's a really cool student teacher / teacher student relationship with clients where you keep growing because we are therapists. And I think that any therapist who might be listening needs to know that whatever you learned clinically, you can expand upon it, 100%. And once you realize that you have a soul, once you open up to the fact that you are more than just this like personality or whatever assessment that we're giving people is. And, to your point, like we were just talking before you came on about like you're using dream work, which is nothing you're taught in a master's program. But, so we have to really go outside these bounds and become aware that there's so much more than what we were taught. And there's so much more healing that can be done with people if we would just open up to just helping them cope and tolerate, right? Which is kind of clinical therapy. And so, so tell me, like, what is your definition of the ego as a therapist, and how did you come to know that? When did it become part of your, vernacular?
So, the ego to me is the part of yourself. This is how I got to know it. The part of yourself that doesn't want you to change, wants you to be stuck in your old patterns of behavior. Like, we learn in psychology and counseling, ego is a part of us. A lot of times it's our childhood aspect of ourselves. It's the part that we needed back then when we were kids to help us navigate the world because we didn't know things back then. But, once we get into adulthood, the ego doesn't serve us anymore. There's really no need for it, not in the way that when we were kids. And so I think for me, it was really about when I realized that I wanted to change, and I just didn't understand what was keeping me stuck. Like it wasn't about, I just needed to be more motivated, or I needed to, take problem solve or take more steps. It was like, there is something inside of me that is like working against me, and I needed to understand that. And then that's when I kind of, did some exploring. And I think I came across an article about like ego and change. And then kind of it evolved from there with me. And I've been working on that ever since. I want to say, I mean, maybe if I had to guess, like within the last like 10 years that I've been working on that. Obviously, we know we take small steps and then we, grow bigger and bigger. So it didn't start off this, fantastic, I'm all in it. Now I understand, aha moment. It was more like, now I understand it a little bit. How can I work that in my life? How can I make it so the ego doesn't prevent me from doing what I need to do.
Yeah, so well said. And I think every person probably that goes into therapy will say something to that effect of like, something is, I can't put my finger on it, but I'm either so scared to look at it, or whatever it is, but I can't change. I can't stop going to the same type of relationship, I can't leave this job. I can't, all these things, right? And to your point, it's so wonderful when someone finally will go like, all right, so this thing isn't me, but it's something that I formulated in childhood to survive, or to think this is how I become successful, or whatever it was that we developed. And so when you were younger, what did your ego look like? What were you quote unquote surviving, or, what was your path of success that you were taught before becoming a counselor?
So I grew up in a household where I had all my basic needs met, but unfortunately, looking back in hindsight, a lot of my emotional needs were not met by either of my parents. It's not to say they're bad people. We don't blame them per se, but I did learn that I needed to find ways of surviving. And I didn't really have the emotional support, I think, from my parents either to help me understand myself. I believe from the time I was born, I was a highly sensitive person, and my needs were different than the needs of maybe my brothers. And so I don't think my parents came from that kind of background to really know, to understand how to nurture that and support that. And so I think that just my ego helped to teach me things. My ego helped to, like, to protect me. My ego showed up in all of these different ways that, for a long time served their purpose. And then it became time in my life when I realized, like, this isn't working anymore. I need to grow. Yeah. I need to move beyond this space and shed that.
That's such a beautiful way, non-judgmental way of talking about the ego, because, in some circles that I have traveled, we're trying to kill the ego. It's like, but you can't, it's a part of you that you can't, you can't let it just will always be there. It's like, once you're aware of something, you can't not be aware of it. You can't like erase fifth grade. You know what I mean? Like, so, and we all adjusted and adapted to a lot of very unnatural things over our lifetime. And it may not be called trauma, but you're still having to adjust to the authentic person that you are. And that's just not something that's celebrated at all. It's not like our parents took the time to say, well, what does Wynn need? What does Sherry needs different than other people, different than me? They're like, you're going to do what I tell you to do, because that's going to make you successful. You're going to be a great economic, powerhouse. And then you're going to, you're going to pay your taxes, and and you're going to get your house, and like all that stuff's fine. And it makes sense. But then over time, you're like, well, what if none of that really fits me? Or what if that feels so restrictive that I now feel sad or anxious? And then, that's where we come in as therapists, as people come in and they say, I am so sad or anxious. It got to this point where, I built this $1 million. I've had people tell me they've had $1 million companies, right? And you're like, but I'm a mess. I'm having panic attacks. I can't do this anymore. And they don't understand why. And to your point, it is this moment where it's like, with no judgment, it's just not working for you anymore. So well said. So how did you first come across that name? You said,
I just want to say, I was lucky too that my mom was really big into psychology and counseling. And I felt like, looking back in hindsight, I'm like, that was kind of put in place, I think, on purpose, because my mom couldn't provide for me. So at least she pushed me into going to see a therapist. And then that's sort of like what got me to want to be that as well. So I feel like there was a little divine intervention going on.
All the time. Yeah, all the time. And we need to recognize that, right? And so when did you first hear the term ego? Was it in school?
Obviously, we grew up with Freud, the id, ego, super ego. But I don't think I understood it back then. Very interestingly enough, I think I was like just learning like everybody else and going, okay, this is what I have to know. And, but not really diving into what does that mean. And yeah, it just really wasn't until, later on, like, again, maybe within like the last 10 years, I just started doing, I wanted to do this extra work. Like I felt like I had personally grown, along professionally up to a certain point, but yet there were these still obstacles that were in my way. And I just wasn't understanding like them, I think, the way I needed to. And so I really just started focusing in, researching as much as I could. What is out there? What's preventing me from changing? Why can't I move forward? And for whatever reason, because I don't know that everybody like jumps on the ego idea, like that just resonated with me. That's kind of all I can say. It just really, when I like looked it up and read about it, I'm like, nope, that's it. That's me. Like, it's my ego. My ego is standing in my way right now. What do I need to do to like make nice to this part of me, but like move aside when I need it to move aside.
Yeah. So was it did you really need to change something drastic in your life, or was it more, I feel like I'm restricted and I need to expand my consciousness? What was happening for you in those moments?
I ended up with some really bad anxiety, and like, I didn't understand, because, I'm a therapist. I'm like, where did this anxiety come from? I couldn't really think back to my life. Like, I knew there were times that I was anxious. I could think about that, remember times maybe when I was a kid or in my 20s, but never to the point that I had it. And this was actually didn't happen until like my 40s, maybe late 30s, early 40s. And just all of a sudden, I just was anxious all the time. And I just didn't know like how to get past it. And I also knew too, like a lot of it felt very visceral. And that was a word that just kept popping up in my head. It's like, I'm like, I worked some of the anxiety out. So some of it made sense to things sort of on the surface, maybe in my life particularly. But there was so much of it that was like, just felt like I was vibrating from within. And it was just this feeling I had. And I couldn't say specifically where the anxiety came from. And I think that's when I started noticing almost like this butting of heads inside me. I pictured like this little match of like, part of me wanting to like get out and fight, and the other part, like the ego going like, no, you stay right here. We're comfy here. Don't go anywhere, and this constant battle. And I really felt like a lot of that's where the anxiety was coming from. It's just this like need to be somebody else and to be doing other things, and really to be authentic. I wanted to be me. It was as simple as that. And I just, obviously had to explore what that was, but
you didn't have
the feeling that I would always have.
So you didn't have a crash and burn moment like, oh my God, my life is on fire. It was more of just like I said in the beginning, is we have these two perspectives, right? And one is constricting and separate, the ego, and then one is like, hey, there's so much more for you if you'll just give us a chance, which is your souls, your guides, or whatever. And so how did you decide to go into that extraordinary place for a counselor, right? It's extraordinary for a counselor to go into some of these extraordinary places. How did you do that?
So I think I experienced what a lot of therapists experience, which is burnout. And, I've been doing this since I, was in my early 30s, and I wasn't doing it right, if that makes sense. I was just doing what I was told to do. And I think I just really felt sort of burnt out. And I actually was going to go into a different direction with my degree.
Oh, okay.
And it was kind of like in that moment, as I pivoted into doing things differently, I ended up in a job where I was just over the phone doing like intakes for people to get into community mental health services. And it was at this, yeah, it was at this job that I realized like I started being so cynical and just so like losing empathy and losing pieces of me. And I
Mm-hmm.
think I just one day I don't even, because I cannot remember exactly when it happened. I feel like it was just one day out of the blue. I just was like, what I asked myself, what do I love about the work I do? And I said,
Wow.
I love to
Great
help
question.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then from there, I realized, well, how do I do that best? And
Mm.
I recognized that I was like born to do this. This is like I knew from the time I was in 6th grade that I was going to be a therapist. And so I wanted to find a way. I needed to tap into my authentic self and my special abilities of like my intuition, my empathy for others, you know, my caring, those that nurturing side of me that I think that
Mm.
I covered up because I had to growing up protecting myself from, you know,
Mm.
from things that I went through, experiences I had, and so forth. And so, you know, that was a big piece of it is that I just realized like I need to delve into this more. What do I need to do to get there? You know, and how
Mhm.
did, so that's kind of a lot of how it began, I think, for me.
Yeah. So it sounds very like self-aware as a counselor to recognize that level of burnout. And then to by
Mhm.
yourself, it sounds like pretty much say, okay, well, I'm meant to do this. I do love
Mhm.
helping people. And I'm realizing that the way that I'm doing it right now with the tools that I was given are causing some level of bitterness or loss of empathy or burnout. And thank God you didn't leave.
Mhm.
Instead, you said, okay, I'm willing to take the extraordinary path. And what was that? What was the first or many extraordinary things you did to reach your soul's perspective?
I mean, I started paying attention to all aspects of myself, I think, both like emotionally and physically. I happen to at the same time, well, I'll backtrack a little bit. Because of my anxiety, I found myself in this like fog state all the time. And I ended up getting into in like a year and a half, get like about three car accidents, you
Oh,
know,
wow.
one major, yeah, a couple minor ones. And it didn't make sense to me. And I'm like, well, why, you know, why am I feeling like what's going on? Like this doesn't, I'm a good driver. Wait a second. And
Mhm, mhm,
so that that ended up, you know, that was kind of a wake up call to notice that. I wanted to figure out what that was about. Unfortunately, I ended up in some physical pain because of
mm,
those, and so I was dealing with that. And I just really wanted to get to like the core. I needed to feel my feelings, and I think I didn't know how to do that even as a therapist, you know. I didn't know how to even just be comfortable with my own emotions.
wow,
And not just, yeah, it's not even the negative ones. Like I wasn't comfortable being happy. I wasn't
wow,
comfortable feeling success and joy, and
wow.
that just didn't seem right to me. Yeah. And
So
so,
ho
you know, so
so the
I really, yeah, I really, go ahead. Win.
let's say those higher emotions like joy are your soul, right? Trying to talk to you
Yes.
from within. And so how did
Yeah.
how did you get to the soul level? Like, what did you do?
So from there, I really focused in on going back. It's funny because I almost went back to when the ego was, you know, first developed, to my childhood. And I
Yeah.
tried to remember like who was I? Who was I back then before life happened, before, you know, society happened, before my parents happened, before, you know, sort of like before I was, I guess the word I think of like corrupted in ways, you know.
Mhm.
And I really just try to tap into who was that person. And I really felt like I felt that spirit. I felt like
Mhm.
it sounds silly to some. I don't have specific memories of when I was a little girl, but I just have this feeling and sensation that I was this little spark plug, that I was this little firecracker who was curious about the world and had a lot of questions and just loved everything out there, and I lost her somewhere along the way.
Yeah.
And so that's what I wanted to get back to. That was the core essence of what I wanted to get back to. That's what I felt like was
Yeah.
my soul.
Did you do that through a particular modality, or was there a modality that was really helpful for you?
I did. Some of that came about through inner child work, I think. Actually working with a healer at one point and tapping into that. And then also from there, I mean, I did find some therapists. I see a therapist too. I find some therapists who, were aligned with the same kind of beliefs and thoughts that I had. They helped me to identify different aspects to be able to call things trauma, even though they weren't on a, traumatic in ways some people think. It was my trauma. And just working and focusing on how to heal that. So I think I use the word, I geared more towards those softer modalities. So, like healing, even dialectical behavioral therapy is a little softer to me, like inner child work, meditation, doing all those things that felt softer and more nurturing and more feminine to me.
Yeah. Awesome. And so how did that start to transform the way you worked with clients?
When I tapped into who I am, like my authentic self, like my realness came out is kind of the word I use. I think, yeah, I feel like it just helped me to really see my clients, to like listen to them, to be able to really tap into where they are in life. I don't, I'm not sure if your audience knows this, but I do call myself an empath, and I do find that I have this gift of just like knowing things out of the blue, like almost little light bulb moments that come up. And again, I feel like that's just my intuition. And I tapped into that, and I tapped into, nurturing and being where my clients are at, and just kind of really being in the present moment with everybody. And that, I think, is what really helped me. I kind of got out of my clinical brain, my clinical overthinking, mind racing, always up in here space. And I moved down into the body, and that was what really made a difference.
Yeah, and that's a huge thing because I think the soul is more centered there, right? And that's where the healing happens rather than in a thinking mental activity of the ego, which seems very much up in the brain. And so it sounds like, without blowing up your whole outer circumstances, you stayed a therapist, you kept working with clients. Did anything in your outer life significantly change through this? The way you practiced, the people that came to you, how did anything possibly change out in the outer side of your life?
Yeah, I mean, interestingly enough, I think when you tap into your soul and you honor that space, then the world will show you what your life is supposed to be like.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was wonderful. I mean, one of the things I stress is like I didn't get rid of like all my friends or anything, or all these toxic people in my life. I mean, here and there, but it coming from that place made my relationships stronger, and I felt more connected to people that I already even had relationships with. So like my two really good friends who I love to death. And it's like nothing really changed about our friendship, but how I started seeing myself and how I started showing up in those friendships and relationships. And like that's what made it richer, better, And so I feel like that just how in my, I found there were more signs in my universe. I was following my path more. So yeah, paying attention for me, like it sounds silly, but like when numbers would show up, I'd see the same number all the time. Like, what did that mean? Reminding me I'm on the right path. And it just, it's so hard sometimes to explain because it's just such this rich, wonderful feeling to be living in your soul. It's so hard to explain to people what it's like until you can actually experience it. But
yeah. I agree with you. My outer circumstances didn't change really. It was more of the experience that I had with people. The connections were way deeper and more meaningful. And like we talked about before we hit record, it's like we just find people. They just show up in your life. Like I don't even know how I met them. They just were there, and it wasn't hard and it wasn't difficult, and it really is a joyful way to be. So how do you deal with your ego now? Because it keeps showing up, obviously, right? Like, how do you marry these two perspectives now?
I mean, I definitely have to say my ego doesn't pop up as often because my ego knows that it's not gonna, have any influence over me. So like, so but it's there. It comes up every now and then, and I think just the way I handle it is acknowledge that it's there, maybe ask what it wants. What's its role in my life right now? Like, what are you looking for? And then just try to work through that. Maybe it's a little more healing I have to do. Maybe it's changing my perspective about something. Maybe it's solving a problem that I do need to solve, or whatever in that moment that it is. But I don't push it away. I don't avoid it. I don't act like it doesn't exist. It is a part of me. It did serve a purpose for a long time. But one of the statements I think I definitely repeat to myself is like, to my ego, you no longer serve that purpose. Like, I can do it. I can take over. Let me take the reins. Let me do what I need to do. Like, I got it.
Yeah. That reminds me of like working with my Reiki master, where she often asks like, what age are you right now when you're talking, and it really is the inner child work. And so maybe that inner child work scenario is sort of what you're saying. We become the older person or the parent talking to the kid. Like you would never let a kid run your life. In real life, right? Like I wouldn't let the 5-year-old version of me run my life, but I still need to listen to it and say, what are you specifically trying to accomplish right now? I love that. It's a great question. And, that little kid might just say like, I just want you to notice me. And like, okay, well, here you are. Like, come, and so maybe it is that simple. It doesn't have to be judgmental. It doesn't have to be like, get away from me or evil. It's more of like, okay, I wouldn't let a 5-year-old run my life, but I would pay attention if it came and said something to me. And I would be like, what do you need right now? And I can provide that because we are the adults now. And to your point, like that's I just really love your viewpoint. It's so non-judgmental. It's so accepting. It's so integrative of these things rather than saying, I can't, deal with my ego, or it's a problem, or it doesn't, it's evil, or it's a bad thing. It's not. It's, to your point, it's just the inner child, not the original inner child, not the thing we were born as a blank slate, but the thing that we mentally used language to a story and concocted it around whatever age and kept like, getting it more solidified because we thought it would be helpful. And then it's not. I mean, it's just such a innocent, beautiful way to talk about it. So I appreciate your perspective a lot. Thank you for sharing it. Thanks. So if people wanted to work with you, can they work with you outside of Michigan, or like, how do you work?
So yeah, unfortunately I'm just licensed in the state of Michigan. So, anyone can work with me. I picked a beautiful name, I feel like, for my practice called Peace and Wellness Counseling. And most people will find me on Psychology Today. I mean, you can Google my name. I believe comes up. I know other people find me sometimes through their insurance websites, which is, pretty generic. But this is how I feel. I feel like people find me when they need me, and I find that I don't act, I'm out there. I put myself in spaces, but I don't do this active marketing because I just believe like people will find me. They'll find when they
Yeah.
need me and they, want to see what I have to offer. So I
Yes.
love
When I
that.
found you on LinkedIn, and one of the things
Yep.
that I didn't know we were really going to talk about, which I think is great, is therapist burnout. And I'm wondering if you have any desire to work with other therapists who might be willing to, pay out of pocket or something to work with you on burnout.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Burnout. I mean, one of the things I know we were going to mention and sort of just didn't, I just sort of organically went with things, but I also do work with dreams.
Mm-hmm.
Dreams, I feel like, are a window into our soul and a great way to connect with ourselves. And so, yes, so I have a couple on the side things that I can do. Yeah, people can reach out to me. I'm very flexible. I want to be there. I want to be there to help people in whatever way they need me to help them.
Yeah.
So that's definitely something I'm always open to, like new different ways of doing things. I also do clinical supervision as well with
Okay.
therapists. So
Yeah, I think that dreams are one thing that no one really needs to argue over. It's like we do all have dreams mostly, and that seems like such a, again, like gentle way to start, because it's like, well, I'll just talk about my dreams. I don't have to pretend like I'm going into the depths of my like beingness to find my soul and what's down there. Like, talk about your dreams. So again, I love your gentle, open, like pretty normal approach. It's just, and it's really non-judgmental. So it's great. Thank you so much for sharing. All right. Well, thank
You're
you so
welcome.
much. I hope you have a
Yeah, this
great
has
rest
been
of your day.
Yeah, you too. You have a good one.
All right.